Committee. I'm David Vogel, Judge Executive. Happy to have you here today for our meeting on March 24th. First of all, let's call the roll.
All right, from Bullitt County, Keith Griffey's in the room. Anybody else on the line? Felicia?
Up there.
Hi, Felicia. How about from the city of Charlestown? City of J-Town? For those on the line, we've got Matt Meunier and Mayor Deere for both in the room. City of Jeffersonville. New Albany. Shively. St. Matthews.
Bernie's here online.
Hello, Bernie. Thanks for joining us. Clark County. Floyd County. Who do we have from NDOT? I think I saw a couple earlier.
Tony McClellan.
Hi, Tony. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Jefferson League of Cities.
Here.
Hey, Mayor. Thanks for joining us. Mayor Chapman's in the room. Who do we have from KYTC here today?
Here, Isidro Delgado. Good afternoon, everyone.
Sure. All right. How about from Louisville Metro? Dirk.
Dirk Golan.
Yeah.
Mike King.
Join us. Hey, Mike. Thought I saw somebody else. Anyone from the Airport Authority, Oldham County?
Right here, Judge Vogel.
Judge is here. How about from Clarksville? Kevin Beatty's in the room as well. Thank you, Kevin. How about from TARP? All right. Let's see. As far as the advisory members, I see Nora from Federal Highways Kentucky. Thank you for joining us, Nora.
Hi,
KYTC District 5, I see Tom there. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
Anybody else? I don't think that's probably, I think that's about it. And shall we go around the room? Or Judge, would you prefer?
Right, that'd be fine.
Okay, all right.
Where do you want to start?
Well, with you, sir.
All right, I'm David Vogel, County Judge from Oldham County.
Craig Burris, Kipton.
Andy Rush with Kipton.
Elizabeth Parker, Kipta.
Clarksville.
Jared Haley, Kipton.
Valerie Moore, Kipta.
Keith Griffey, Bullitt County.
Matt Meunier, Jeffersontown.
Bill Deere, Mayor, City of Jeffersontown.
Joseph Garcia, Kipta.
Alex Pazurski, Kipton.
Jeremy Shaw, Kipta.
I'm Sean Dykes with the Lockwood Group.
Nick Vale, Kipta. Howard Chapman, City of Bulltown. All right, thank you. I think we've been all the way around the room.
Yes.
John Callahan with the council. Sorry, okay.
I'm sorry for being late. And we certainly do have a quorum, sir.
All right. With that, we'll call this meeting to order. We'll ask for our approval for our February 20 meeting minutes. Motion. Here. Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the February meeting minutes.
Too late, Dirk. How about a second, Dirk? Will you second those? Dirk?
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? Corrections? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, public comment period. Believe we're going to, is that you, Greg?
Yes, sir.
Greg Burris. Okay, go ahead.
We did not receive any comments prior to the meeting. I don't see any in the chat. I also do not see anybody in the public here in the room. So if not, we're going to close that.
All right. Next item is the overview of staff. Andy?
We have a public involvement report real quick too for Greg.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, good.
An abbreviated report from compared to last month, but good news is social media wise, we'll probably have one of our better months in quite a while. As you can see from Facebook, saw almost over 7,000 impressions. We had an amazing number of engagements, 928. Just a quick reminder, that is people that liked, shared, clicked on links. That is an engagement. So that means we're just seeing a lot more people out there to see our posts and really beginning to engage with it. So that's a good, solid thing, especially the fact we only did 10 posts. Comparatively, most months we do roughly close to 20. So with half the posts, that means we actually saw more impressions, more engagements. That was anchored by a precedent corridor plan that got a ton of response on social media. Same thing with Twitter. We saw over 4,500 impressions. From the website side of things, still good news. Transportation main page was up, 212 people viewing that. Public outreach events, we went and spoke to the Support for Community Living Coalition back at the end of February. That was a follow-up to our Thrive Center meeting. They actually joined us for that, and they had some follow-up questions and wanted us to kind of speak to their group on a little bit on what KIPTA does and our kind of our partnership with TARC. We have some planned outreach events as well for the next few coming months, so that's a good thing to see. It looks like things are starting to come back, so I'm hoping that we're going to be out and about with the public more, being able to kind of get out and share what KIPTA is and what we're doing. So I'll take any questions if anybody's got any, but that concludes this month's report.
All right, any questions? Seeing none, all right, thank you, Andy, Greg. Now we're on, item 5 here, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that'll be our overview, and that's, Andy?
Yes, it'll be, so we're gonna try something, a little bit different today. We're gonna, I'm gonna be sharing this presentation, duties in this presentation with, Ms. Elizabeth Fark and Mr. Nick Bale. And so we're gonna tag team on this one. But even better, we're gonna try to make this an interactive presentation today. So Greg's getting it open, okay? And so, let me make sure this works here, okay? So, if you're out there in cyberspace, please browse to this website, www.slido.com, and enter that code. If you're in the room and you want to jump on your smartphone, please do the same, because we're going to have a couple interactive polls here coming up. We got about 3, so we're going to try this today and see how it works. So, Slido.com, and that's our code right there. So give people a few seconds to get there before we move on. So we'll see how this works. But anyways, what we're doing today is, there's been so much change, right? There's been so much change to some of the committee members, certainly to KIPTA staff, to the transportation community, the new highway bill, the new transportation infrastructure bill, et cetera. So we want to kind of reset the table to what this TPC's opportunities, responsibilities, et cetera, are. So we've got kind of an overview, and then maybe a direction where we want to head going forward. So let's jump right in to that Slido poll, please, Greg.
Yeah, well, just a second. I have
All
to
right.
take care of something.
Yep.
What's that code again?
Let's bring it back up. You have it?
Yes. 109568.
Numbers guy. All right, can we go to Slido, please? All right, there it is again. All right, we're going to start out with an easy one, maybe. Let's see how it goes. So KIPTA staff, please do not answer, at least not at first, okay? So KIPTA staff, just watch, okay? What is an MPO? Plain and simple. What is an MPO? Are we a state agency that does just all kinds of different types of planning? Is that what we are? Are we the staff? Are we staff? Many of which you see in here. Are we the staff in an organization that's here to conduct transportation planning because federal highways or the federal government tells us to be here? Is that what we are? Are we a federal agency? Are we a federal agency that just works with the state DOTs, and on the side we work with the cities on this or that? Are we the policy board of an organization created and designated to carry out the transportation planning process? In other words, is the TPC the MPO? Or are we some offshoot of, do we all work for Dirk Owen and Mike King, and we're a Louisville Metro department focused on regional issues? So if you can, please select one. One of these, a couple of these are in the neighborhood of right. One of them's clearly not, or several of them aren't. But there is one correct answer here, so I'll give you a couple seconds to answer. We got a countdown going over here. And then we'll show the answers here momentarily, or we'll show what the poll says here in a minute. 5 seconds. 3. All right. 74%. 74%, uh-oh, it's changing. 68%. Are we sure? All right, locking in, final answer. 68% says that the MPO is the policy board, now 70. I think people are seeing what other people answered. And that is the correct answer, by the way. And the second answer is not the correct answer. That's a very important thing, that the MPO, this is the MPO, all right? We as staff around the room, we are the staff that support the MPO functions. We provide the technical expertise and the staff for the TPC in particular. So I want everybody to remember that, to recognize that, to know that for the first time or for the 100th time, that's what we're here to do. We do get federal funds. State funds certainly are part of what we do in the form of our planning documents. And thankfully, does that say 0% say we work for Dirk? I think it says. So that's
Surprised Dirk didn't vote for himself.
yeah. All right, that worked pretty good. All right. So we'll move on to the presentation now. So thank you for your responses, and we got another question for you later. 2 more questions for you later.
I don't even work for myself.
Right. All right. So there's the question, and let's move on. So a little bit of history. MPOs were created. Well, there's the right answer once again. But they were created back in the 60s. Okay. KIPTA as an MPO was, I believe, in the early to mid 70s. Once the 2 governors of Kentucky and Indiana helped form us. MPOs are required in urban areas, or MPOs are established in urban areas where there are 50,000 people or more living in that area. Okay. So we certainly have more than 50,000, have for decades. Larger MPOs or larger areas have additional responsibilities, and they're known as transportation management areas. And KIPTA is one of those. And with this upcoming census, the urbanized area is likely to exceed 1 million. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, that makes the region available to receive a couple different other some of the new grant programs, for example. So 1 million is the threshold in a couple of them, if I'm not mistaken. There's the laws that basically establish what metropolitan planning is. Okay, it says what a TIP document is, Transportation Improvement Program, what a Metropolitan Transportation Plan program is. It establishes who is required to be on the MPO's policy committee. So it establishes who we should have on our TPC. So we'll move on. You've probably seen this before. That yellow area right there, that's from the 2010 census, okay? That is the census-defined urbanized area. So why is that important? That's important because all of the federal funding programs where dollars get sub-allocated to KIPTA, to the TPC, are based on the people that live in that yellow, or in 2010 lived in that yellow area, okay? So KIPTA had, I think the number is 970,000. That is, we were the largest, or the Louisville, Jefferson County urban area was the largest in the country, under 1 million. So 970,000 people or so lived in that yellow area back in 2010. Okay, and again, that's important because we get funding based on how many people live in that yellow area. You may be wondering, where's the 2020 census defined urban area? And it's not available yet. It's coming out, I think the last we heard was in the fall. Everything with the census is a little bit delayed, so I'm sure we'll have that for you guys real soon. So, slightly different areas, the KIPTA Metropolitan Planning Area. So that's within that black boundary. Okay. So as you all know, it's the entirety of the 5 most urban counties. That is Jefferson, Bullitt, Oldham, Clark, and Floyd. It also includes 0.1 square miles of Harrison County, has for years. And after the 2010 census, it also includes 4 square miles of Shelby County. So it includes that 0.1 square miles and that 4 square miles because those areas are in the yellow, within the yellow boundary, okay? So in 2020, that yellow boundary changed, and it changed to include Shelby County for the first time, okay? So those 4 square miles are included. So KIPTA, as the larger agency, as you all know, includes, is a 9-county area, 7 in Kentucky, 2 in Indiana. Those representatives from those counties are going to meet next door at 1 o'clock for the Regional Transportation Council. So they've got a similar but separate process, different process. And then those folks, as you all know, will join most of you all for the KIPTA board meeting here in an hour. Who's on the TPC? Well, you all are on the TPC. So we have 18 members. We have 18 members. Those are the members of the TPC that have voting membership, okay, in the navy blue. And those in the red are advisory members, and we regularly get participation from our advisory members as well. So there's 18 members. You know, this is subject to review, and depending on that yellow boundary of the 2020 census, maybe there could be some changes. And 2020 census outcomes, sizes of certain cities, maybe we, at some point in the next year or two, may come to you guys with a recommendation or put to this body who should be voting members going forward. Okay. So you hear us talk about a quorum. You know, we need to make sure you have 7 of you all here, and today we have maybe double that. The idea of alternate members. Okay, we have 18 members, and those 18 members are the offices. Okay, so it is in J-Town's case, it's J-Town mayor, but Matt Meunier is the alternate member for J-Town. So Mayor Dearf or Matt are welcome to participate and regularly do participate. The TARC chairman of the board is the participant, but our TPC vice chair this year is Carrie Butler as executive director of TARC. So it's the positions, okay? And so that matters because, you know, 18 members, but we have 40 alternate members. And so as many of you all know, all it takes is a letter from that office saying, I would like Matt Meunier to represent J-Town as the alternate member. So as long as we've got that on file, Keith Griffey is an alternate member for Bullitt County. Judge Summers is the primary member. So as long as we have that on file, that's good to go. You guys as alternate members have all the power that your bosses do as the listing of those offices, okay? So I just want to be clear on that. So we've got a set of bylaws. I don't want to get too far into this, but it's broken down. It breaks down what we're here to do. That's kind of that first thing on the screen, the purpose and authority. Talks about the membership, who's a member, what it takes to add members, okay? It talks about our officers, how we establish officers. It says things about meetings, how we will meet, you know, the 4th Thursday of the month. Talks about the establishment of the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee, which Mr. Griffey is the chairperson of this year and last. So it talks about the responsibilities of the Ttcc as well. It establishes the idea that this body can create subcommittees to focus on certain efforts. So that's something that we haven't done a whole lot of as of late. So that's an interesting thing. It talks about how we use Robert's Rules of Order for our parliamentary authority. And it talks about what it would take, down at the bottom, those in this room can't see it, it says amendment of bylaws procedure, if we need to ever change these bylaws, what it would take and what sort of vote it would take to do so. So those in the room can't see this all that well, but this is a bit of a summary. So the KIPTA TPC is related to 3 very important things, and probably a couple more things that I didn't include. So KIPTA TPC, you guys, are related to the KIPTA Board of Directors. You're one of several committees at KIPTA, as many of you all know. So those, the various committees, whether it be transportation or regional water council or some of the social service committees, that rolls up to that board of directors, and they meet here at 2 o'clock on the 4th Thursday. So from the transportation perspective, what does the board do for the transportation side of the house? Well, mostly it's those 2 things, contracting and human resources type things. So we take our contracts, our RFPs to them for certain. HR, Kelly does an HR report, as many of y'all know, and so in budgeting as well. So that's part of what gets discussed at the board of directors. Okay, so there's the Ttcc over there in the bottom left. So they're here for technical review and oversight and assistance. So as you all know, most of the time from Ttcc, you know, we present similar information, maybe more technical at those meetings, and that body often recommends it to the TPC, right, to go ahead and approve it. They give their advice, okay? And then KIPTA Mpo staff, kind of similar, I suppose. You know, we're here to be, like I said, we're the technical staff, so we're responsible for putting together the TIPs, the MTPs, the participation plans, the UPWPs, et cetera. And then also, the KIPTA Transportation Director is the recording secretary. So I have a role in the bylaws that says what I'm supposed to do in hosting this meeting here. So, moving on, here's our organizational chart. Most of those folks are in the room today. That's who we are. That's the Transportation Division of KIPTA. So we've got 4 GIS staff on the left. We've got 4, what it says, commuter service positions on the right. That's our van pool program, or that's Every Commute Counts program, which most of their work and efforts is toward the regional van pool program. And then there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, if you count myself, 11 of us that deal probably more directly, that's down the middle, the transportation planning functions. So most of which are transportation planners. So a lot of familiar names on there, and there's a lot of new names, some of which are in the room today. So I hope everybody, either out there on the line or in the room, gets a chance to meet some of our new staff. So look forward to that soon. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick. Nick's got a little bit to talk about on the funding side. Thank you. Okay, when it comes to kind of the core planning products that KIPTA is responsible for providing, is required by law for providing, is most notably the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP. You'll hear that thrown around a lot. We put a lot more details into these slides than we normally would because we're planning to use this and post it up on our website, so people can always go refer to it. So I'm not going to get into all the details of all this, but the MTP is a long-range policy document. It has to go out at least 20 years in terms of planning horizon, and it's required to be updated every 4 years. The Transportation Improvement Program is a short-range fiscal programming document, hence the name. Any federally funded projects and any regionally significant state or locally funded projects that are set to occur in the next 4 years must be included in the TIP. And that is important because when KYTC or NDOT, along with their sponsors, the individual project sponsors, when they go to federal highways and ask for authorization for funding for the right-of-way phase of a particular project, the federal highways is going to go back and say, is that project in the TIP? And along with that, is it in the STIP? So all of the TIPs across Kentucky and Indiana are wrapped up into a statewide TIP. A little more about MTP and TIP. So there's really 3 different scenarios for which transportation projects exist in the MTP and or TIP. So the first would be when a local public agency is planning a project that has not secured funding within the TIP years, but it has a proposed project, that project goes into the MTP, the long-range plan. When a local public agency has secured funding within the TIP years for a project that does not fit our group project policy, then that project will go in both the MTP and the TIP, long-range and short-range. And then for those projects for which a local public agency has secured funding, but it does fit KIPTA's group project policy, then that project is only found in the TIP. And those are considered minor or small-scale projects that don't have any, or they're considered air quality exempt. In lack of a better word, they don't expand the roadway capacity, added travel lanes, added roads, interchanges, etc. MTP status, MTP and TIP status, where are we right now? At this point in time, we are operating under the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 MTP and the fiscal year 2020 to 2025 TIP. Back on February 27th of 2020, this body approved both of those documents, and on March 3rd, 2020, Federal Highways Kentucky, along with Federal Transit Administration Region 4, in partnership with several other federal agencies, found that our MTP and TIP conform to the 2015 8-hour ozone national ambient air quality standards. So the federal government, when we do a new MTP or TIP, they wouldn't even have to review it if it wasn't for the fact that we are in a non-attainment area for ozone. Now, they do review our documents every 4 years as part of our federal certification review. Andy's actually going to talk about that later today. The current MTP and TIP will lapse on March 2nd, 2024, and if that occurs, it will severely limit our ability to add and modify projects in the TIP and MTP. So we don't want that to happen, and we have plans in place to make sure that doesn't happen. To the point that we are planning to seek TPC approval of a new MTP or TIP, MTP and TIP, no later than June of 2023. So that's kind of the goal we're shooting for next year. Other core planning products that we are responsible for putting together, the Unified Planning Work Program. This is another document that Andy's going to be talking about later today. This is the annual statement of work, all of the activities that our planning staff plan to conduct, as well as any planning studies specific to a project, a corridor, or jurisdiction. TIP is also going to be restarting our annual call for planning studies, and as with the other items, we're going to be talking about that more today as well. The public participation plan, that is something that Greg updated, and you all approved that update back on February 24th, so last month. That outlines all of our methods, strategies for engagement, and how when we must and will go out for public comments, and when it's more optional. That covers our kind of core planning products. Other things that we have in the works are, one is the active transportation plan, as well as the complete streets policy that's been ongoing for, honestly, a couple years. We've had some starts and stops, but we're still planning and working on that. The congestion mitigation process, the coordinated human services transportation plan. That's a coordinated plan that we work directly with TARC and other transportation providers to help put together. There's an environmental justice document, intelligent transportation systems architecture report, performance management plan. That's a new thing that came about in terms of federal mandates through the MAP 21, so 2 federal transportation authorization bills prior to the one we're on now. And then Elizabeth and her folks completed a regional freight mobility study back in February of 2019. So those are a lot of the other planning studies. You can find all of those out on our website. Talking more specifically about funding, there are essentially 4 primary agencies that are responsible for awarding transportation funds to projects in the KIPTA region. Regardless of who awards the funds, this body still has to approve that those projects go into our TIP and or MTP. This is not an exhaustive list of every program. These are really the highlights, the annual formula programs that we in the states as well as TARP rely on. There are a number of other discretionary and competitive programs that are too numerous to list here. And I didn't spell out all of these because if I spelled out all these acronyms, there would be 4 pages of slides. But the National Highway and Freight Program is NHFP. National Highway Performance Program is another. Section 130, that's all about railway and roadway safety crossings. And then some of the more traditional ones you guys have heard of here, Surface Transportation Block Grant, CMAQ program, which is all about air quality and congestion management, along with a number of others. There are 3 formula programs that TARC receives funds for every year. Section 5307 is the largest and the broadest. They use it for anything from preventive maintenance to acquiring capital vehicles, renovating buildings. Section 5310 is the enhanced mobility for older adults and individuals with disabilities. That's an annual competitive program that TARC is responsible for awarding, and those funds typically go out to small nonprofit agencies who work with those population groups. And then the 5339 program is the Bus and Bus Facilities program. That is a formula that provides funds specifically for vehicles and vehicle-related assets to make sure they're in a state of good repair. Most importantly, on the far right, Epc Mpo Dedicated Funds. These are the programs from which this body has the authority to award funds from. In Indiana, we receive sub-allocations from all 4 of those programs. In Kentucky, it's just 2. And there is potentially a 5th one that may be added, the Carbon Reduction Program. That's a new program that came out of the Bipartisan Infrastructure law that was passed in November. And we're still waiting to hear more about that. But based on some estimates from federal government, fiscal year 2022 amounts range about $2.6 million in Kentucky that we would likely receive, and about $400,000 in Indiana. We still have not heard for sure whether both states plan to sub-allocate those funds to us or not, but more information will be coming about those. Mpo dedicated programs, here's just a little bit more information about the specific programs. Congestion mitigation, air quality, obviously focused on projects that improve the air quality. Highway safety improvement program, kind of self-explanatory there, all about safety. Surface transportation block grant program. Block grant is the key word there. This is a very vast program in terms of the types of projects that are eligible. And then the transportation alternatives program is all about bicycle and pedestrian focused projects. Annually, we receive approximately $1 to $2 million in Indiana. Again, Kentucky does not sub-allocate CMAQ and HSIP to the MPOs. Indiana provides about $700,000 to $900,000 annually for HSIP funds, $2 to $4 million for surface transportation block grant program in Indiana, and $20 to $27 million in Kentucky. And then finally, the transportation alternatives program, we typically receive about $200,000 to $400,000 annually, and $2 to $3 million in Kentucky. And the reason why there are ranges there is the higher numbers are the more recent appropriations amounts that just came through with the new bill. And those have been matched by a federal appropriations, the appropriations bill was just recently passed last week. That now matches the funding that was set about in the authorization bill. That means we should be receiving closer to $27 million going forward in Kentucky. Managing our Mpo dedicated funds, we've had rules in terms of how these programs are managed since, I think, 2016. We updated that in 2020. Basically talks about the requirements, the procedures, how we do our calls for projects. Typically, we do those every couple years. The last one was in 2020, and that was only for Kentucky agencies. And the next call will be later this fall, and funds will be available in both states. There are opportunities for cost increases in Indiana due to the lack of the low funding levels. It's very sporadic in terms of when we have money for cost increases. In Kentucky, we pretty much have an ongoing cost increase reserve that's set aside, and we haven't had an issue funding any cost increases in Kentucky. I've been doing this. Phase shifts, that is when a project has been delayed a year or more. In Indiana, this is very complicated because NDOT does not allow us to carry over funds from one year to another. So we have to be flexible. Partners in Indiana have to be willing to kind of move projects up or behind or back in terms of making sure our funding is balanced. And then you can't see it quite well as we got at the bottom, but Kentucky does allow for carryover balances, which is nice and flexible. It also means that we need to responsible for making sure that we spend those in a timely manner. Other differences between the two states and how the Mpo dedicated programs work. Indiana runs on a fiscal year from July to June as it relates to transportation programming. And typically the last opportunity to obligate funds is in early May, so it's almost a 10-month fiscal year. Again, we can't carry over funds. We've done a pretty good job in the past of allocating or obligating about close to 99% of what we've received each year. We can trade with other MPOs. That's always a thing. That's some flexibility, although it's hard to pull off. And NDOT does allow us to transfer funds between the four programs. So as long as we're spending at least 50% of what we're allocated each year in each one of those four programs, we're good to go. We got the thumbs up. I track that on a year-to-year basis, and that's a federal rule that provides that, but the states also have to allow MPOs to do that. In Kentucky, the opportunity to obligate transportation funds runs from October to September. We can carry over funds. We did have a recommendation back in 2014 from Federal Highways about working to reduce our carryover balance in the STBG program. And we typically don't transfer funds between surface transportation block grant and TA programs simply because we have more than enough funding to be able to fully fund almost every project. Last but not least, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law bill It also formally was called the, I think, IIJA. Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act? Yeah, there you go. Sounds that right? That was the official, and then it's AKA now the bill. So you'll hear bill a lot, I think. It was signed back in November. It runs from fiscal year 2022 to 2025, substantially increases the amount of funding, over 20% in most of our dedicated programs. And carbon reduction program may be another thing that's coming our way. There's also been several new competitive grant opportunities, which is, I think, part of the reason why John Callahan was brought in by Metro to help with all of the different competitive grants that are out there in terms of, there's Protect program, a lot of money coming out for EV, electric vehicle charging infrastructure, as well as the congestion relief program. And then finally, there is a new requirement for states and MPOs to carry out complete streets planning efforts. So you'll hear a lot more about complete streets from us, including a presentation from Mike Sewell later this afternoon. That's all I've got. Over to Elizabeth. Was there any questions or comments? I know that was a lot of information. This presentation will be out online after this, so you can ask me now or at a later date.
Earlier in the presentation, there was a term, something about environmental justice. So what's the definition of that?
Environmental justice is basically an establishment, or environmental justice areas, I suppose, are areas that are disadvantaged areas, and that's a topic of debate right now too, because some of the federal funding programs, the competitive grants, there's some new definitions floating around out there in the space about disadvantaged communities, I think is what they're calling it. But in the KIPTA region, there are established environmental justice areas established by KIPTA transportation staff that are for whether or not the area, the census tract, Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong, the census tract has a minority population that's twice the regional average, or a low-income population that's twice the regional average. So those areas have been identified. Those are the areas that we look to do a lot of our outreach to, try to focus our outreach to. But the new bill, the infrastructure bill, has a heavy preference toward projects, programs, initiatives in those EJ areas. Again, those EJ areas in the KIPTA context are KIPTA specific. Sounds like there's going to be some new definitions, and maybe EJ as we know it may kind of go away, because there's going to be some definitions. Are you in this area for whatever they're going to call it in the future to get some of these grant dollars? Stay tuned on that one, I should say. Any more questions about Nick? Because if not, we've got some more. We've got a couple more questions. We've got a couple more Slidos here.
Just more.
Promise.
Now we want to hear a little more of your feedback on what the TPC, what you all, your role with your agency, and thinking about your role with the region, what you all would like to prioritize with what we present here at TPC, who we bring in to talk to you all, information that you all would like to hear about. And then the second one will be what kind of initiatives you would like staff, KIPTA, the TPC to take on and prioritize kind of above everything, maybe put more emphasis on, as you'll see in the UPWP, we have many tasks that we are required to do, but we can always have the ability to emphasize some things over others. So for this first one, go ahead and open it. What would y'all like to hear about? So some options are federal initiatives, what's coming through with the bill, statewide projects and initiatives, such as the Indiana Freight Plan or the Kentucky Long Range Plan. Local projects initiatives, what's going on in the counties, what's going on in the cities around our region. We can bring in more subject matter experts with transportation planning trends. Mike Sewell is joining us here today and is all of that. We can report more on projects such as funding distribution or project type or funding type. We can do more staff reports on planning issues or more frequent staff reports on our ongoing activities, kind of taking things more piecemeal to you all, if you all would like more updates with that. So vote, I think it lets you select more than one, just kind of a ranking to give us an idea of what we should think about when we're planning out these meetings. A couple more seconds on that. If you have any very specific ideas about this, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat too, and we will take note of that as well. So go ahead and move on to the second. So the second one is, what initiatives would you all like to prioritize? Go ahead and open. Some of these are kind of topical, such as safety. We could go above and beyond our current safety analysis. For example, we could start looking at specific hotspots, maybe time of day analysis, type, that kind of analysis of safety. Same thing with resiliency or alternate mode planning. We could also prioritize planning studies, whether they are sponsor-led, corridor plans, small area studies, or regional studies, like technology data studies. Kind of flowing into that, we could start prioritizing Mpo-developed projects.
Results are.
They're live.
They're live. You can vote several different.
I don't see how to vote on that.
I have it pulled up on my laptop too, if you need. We could also, as Andy mentioned, kind of go into more subcommittees. We could have outreach subcommittees. We could have biped subcommittees. We've many examples from other NPOs. So that's kind of a list. And again, if there's an idea that you've been thinking about, please drop that in the chat, and we are more than happy to explore that.
Yeah.
You can just smell that. All right, well, and thank you so much for voting, and we'll probably just give you a little, summarization next time.
Yeah, we'll come back to you guys with the results here, and even more importantly than that, we will take these results to heart and look to go some of these directions. I think that, could be a good time to reassess some of these things and make sure that what we present and take an hour and a half of everybody's time here on the fourth Thursday of every month, that we are doing it right, where it's informative, it's important information that you can take back to your communities, your states. But let's keep this conversation going. It's not just a one-time presentation thing. And if there's more educational things, maybe we could add that one as another one. Educational things to inform you all of what we do as staff, what some of these things might mean, what would it mean to do the regional versions of some of these planning studies. We are more than willing to help out on any of those types of topics. So with that, any more, Elizabeth?
No.
Okay, I think we're done with that agenda item, so I think we're ready to move on. And like I said, we'll get back, maybe we'll do next month, we'll show those results, make sure we got them finalized. So thank you all for participating in that. I think that went pretty well,
All right, which item do you think we're on?
Right now, we should move on to agenda item number 6.
And
Six, all right.
Yes, sir.
quick question, you all do training for newly elected officials on?
We do. Jerry, you wanna talk about that?
We do for the agency level, for all newly elected officials. We do it for all our program areas to bring in and show what services are available, there for all of our boards and committees. So,
After the election?
yes, we try to do it ideally in that time between November and January when they start office, because everything's so busy once you start. But that was actually on our, agenda for next week's, management meeting to start planning for that board orientation.
So that's always a good time for that, but, like I said, this needs, and the TPC perspective, let's keep that educational going. If we say something that if any of the KIPTA staff say something, you're like, what does that mean, or what's that acronym mean? Never be shy to ask, and never be shy to catch us before or after a meeting, email or otherwise. And we're more than happy to help out. So.
All right, item number 7 here is, 6, I'm sorry, the federal certification review update.
Yeah, I'll be quick on this one. As I've presented in the past, and as you heard from our federal highways delegation that was here last month, in part anyways, about our federal certification review. That's a once every 4 years assessment of, not of KIPTA, not of the KIPTA TPC or of KIPTA staff, not necessarily anyways. It's of the transportation planning process in this region, okay? So it goes above and beyond just the TPC and just above and beyond staff. I want to be clear about that. It's the process in the region. So, a big portion of that, the primary portion of it, if you will, and I've mentioned this before, but this just to reiterate, we've got what's called the site visit for this federal certification review. The site visit is scheduled for June 22nd and 23rd, okay? That'll start out on that day 1 with a tour. TARC has been gracious enough to let us use the TARC bus to go on a tour of some significant projects that have been constructed in the last 4 years. Again, it's once every 4 years. So what's new in the last 4 years? We'll have what I've called formal review proceedings. They're kind of formal, but they'll be in this room. It'll be mostly KIPTA staff answering questions from our federal partners, presenting to the federal partners, showing off some of those planning products that Nick mentioned in his presentation, showing off what's new there. Also includes a public listening session. That's a public hearing type meeting. That'll be on the night of June 22nd. I probably should have put sessions plural, because the week leading up to that, I think it's on June 16th, there will be a virtual public listening session. That's a new agenda item for this one as compared to prior iterations of the certification review. So again, the night of June 22nd, we'll have a public meeting, a public hearing. Same thing on June 16th, which will be exclusively virtual. The one on the 22nd will be hybrid, kind of like our meeting here. And then it culminates with our federal planning partners will present their preliminary findings to the TPC. Preliminary findings should say things like, are there any corrective actions? That's the worst. Corrective action says, in order to be certified, you need to stay certified, you need to do this by that date, okay? So we want 0 of those, and hopefully we'll have 0 of those. I don't think we're gonna have any of those. Wishful thinking anyway. We did not have any last time, by the way. The second category would be recommendations. Recommendations is what our federal planning partners will give us to say, you know, have you thought about this? You might think about doing it this way instead of that way. So there'll be some recommendations. There always are. So those are constructive criticism a lot of times. So we'll get some of those. And then there's commendations. Commendations are that's the attaboys, attagirls that says this region does a really good job at fill in the blank, and we got several of those last time, and hopefully we'll get several of those again this coming time. Here's some of the focal points. I won't go in those too much in depth, but the letter to Judge Vogel, as the chairman of the TPC, it lined these out. Okay, you know, some new, some old, some meaning some things that are typically focal points. There's obviously going to be an emphasis on things like climate change, resiliency, complete streets, active transportation, some of the new emphasis areas with the new infrastructure bill. We'll end up with a report, like you can see there, kind of in the middle. That's our report. That's covered from our report last time. That'll come, I think, within 60 days, if I'm not mistaken, 60 or 90 days after they do that site visit. Okay, that's the final report. That will live on for the next 4 years. That will have those recommendations, commendations, hopefully no corrective actions in it, among other information. Who participates? We've been told that there will be 7, what I've called reviewers on this slide. I don't know if that's the proper name or not, but that, in other words, those are the federal planning partners. Okay, so we'll have 2 from the Kentucky Division of Federal Highways, somebody from Indiana Division, somebody from their headquarters is going to join us this year. 2 representatives from FTA. Region 4 is the region in the southeast, while Region 5 is the Midwest. KIPTA, as a bi-state region, is a bi-state region, as in 2 states, but we are also in the federal regions. We also have 2 regions as well. So we're in the southeast and the Midwest both. And then someone from the EPA plans to join us as well. So who's going to be on the other side of it? KIPTA staff, of course, TARC, KYTC, and NDOT will likely be a part of it. The public, so the public has a chance at those public hearings to be a part of it and throughout the process, but the public hearings most notably. And I put on there you as Ttcc members. Hopefully, whether or not you're here all day for a day and a half, probably not, but if your support leading up to it at the meeting at TPC that day is valuable. So I do hope that you all will be able to join us in some way, shape, or form for that certification review. And that is all I have. This is no action information.
All right. Next item, well, this is the call for studies here, for Andy, is it you?
It is me again. Maybe a little bit of Elizabeth too, maybe, we'll see. So, one of the things in the new, Nick mentioned that the federal funding programs are almost universally across the board have gone up, right? Included in what's gone up are what are known as Metropolitan Planning Funds, or you hear them often referred to as PL funds. You hear us saying the words PL funds from time to time. So those, like many of the other programs, are all on the rise with the new infrastructure bill. Okay, and so one of the things, well, a little bit about the PL funds. So those are federal dollars, to be clear. Those are federal dollars that get passed down through KYTC and NDOT, and those are dollars that get passed from those two state agencies to the MPOs across each of the respective states. Okay, so these dollars can go toward, to be very clear, they go toward the MPO's operations. Okay, so our salaries, fringe benefits, our computers, our licenses for all of our software. These PL funds is what pays for it, by and large. Okay. So KIPTA has to match those funds, by the way, too. 80-20 match, just like a project. Many of your all's projects that receive federal funds. Also, and it's not mentioned here, we get a little bit from Federal Transit Administration too. Those are Section 5303 dollars. So very similarly, on a per capita basis, federal transit dollars come to the MPOs. So it's very similar. So those in this case, we can use them kind of interchangeably. Again, it's up about 15% with the new infrastructure bill. More specifically, in Kentucky MPOs received a raise, if you will, of 12.5%, while in Indiana, the number is somewhere around 20 to 25%. So it is a nice increase. So how are we going to spend it? Well, what we would like to do to spend most of that increase is, in an effort to limit the match, let's say, that KIPTA must pay on those dollars, we're going to open up what we haven't done, at least this formally, in maybe a decade, or at least many years, put out a call for studies so that any agency, any KIPTA agency, can apply for these PL funds to do a corridor study, a county study, data collection type activities. So we want to open up a call for those types of projects once again. Again, we used to do a lot of it. We've done a little bit over the last several years, but we'd like to make this a big part of what we do going forward as funds allow. Okay? So, what is eligible? Again, transportation planning studies, all types of them. Okay? So, corridor planning study that looks at a road that has some new issues, and we're looking to develop a project or a series of projects, or we know a problem exists, and so hey, we should study that. We should study that corridor. Maybe it's a county level planning study. We've funded several of those over the years, some of which have a little bit of age on them right now, to be honest. So maybe it's an update of one of those, let's say. Data collection activities would be eligible to do some data collection as well, okay? But maybe more importantly is what's in the finer print there. What you can't do is you can't basically do the project with these dollars, okay? So it's important that these dollars go toward the study of the project, not maybe let's call them the traditional phases of the project. You may wonder how much is available. We put $225,000. I think it's about, there's a squiggly line and an asterisk there. So what we don't know yet, we do not know, I mentioned those $5303, the transit dollars. We don't know how much more of those we're going to get. We have not received word on how much more of those we're going to get this year. We also have a little bit of carryover funds in Indiana, so we may have, I think the number, let's say this, that number is probably conservative, okay? It's probably more likely to go up than it is down, okay? And for our Indiana friends in the room in cyberspace, it's maybe likely to go more up for you all than it is on the Kentucky side because of some of the Indiana carryover funds. So I think that's worth mentioning here. Time frame, we've got to spend them next year, okay? So the process is in play to get these projects underway this summer at the beginning of the fiscal year, beginning of the KIPTA fiscal year, and they need to be completed by the end of next fiscal year, okay? So we need to make sure that anything that you apply for can get done, you know, summertime of this year to summertime next year. How do you apply for these funds? Well, they're due April 18th, and more on that here. Let's see. Well, I'll go into this, and I'll go hold that thought on the on how do you apply, because we'll show it here in a moment. So again, the application process. I think I'm going to skip this in an effort to. You know, I'm going to try to share my screen, Greg, if that's okay. All right. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. It's shown up there. Okay, good. So on KIPTA's transportation, KIPTAtransportation.org, you go to forms. As early as later this afternoon or tomorrow, pending TPC approval, let's say, you will find this informational packet, if you will, okay? So it gives a lot of the details I just mentioned, okay? So what are the expectations? Timeline, okay? So timeline, April 18th, you should have received an email from me. All Ttcc members and TPC members received an email from me in the last couple of weeks, kind of pre-announcing this, what I'm talking about right now. KIPTA staff, we've developed a scoring system, more on that in a second. And the plan right now is for us to come back to the TPC with a recommendation of the funding awards. You know, to be candid with you guys, you know, again, it's only $225,000. I would like to spread it, you know, several projects thin. I am extremely confident from some of the feedback that we've received so far that it's going to be an extremely competitive process. I don't know how much we'll get in terms of the dollars amount, but if we got $1 million in planning study applications, I would not be surprised, to be clear. So I want to be clear about that and apologize for that we have to say no to several folks. I worry. So again, we hope that this will become a bigger part of our annual process. So in other words, if not this year, maybe next year type thing. I hate to say that up front, but I really do think that this could be a big part of what we do going forward, and hopefully in a similar dollar amount. So once you get there, you'll have some information to fill out. Dirk, do you have a question?
Yeah, I know we can also use STBG funds for planning studies as well.
That's correct. Our project management guidebook, our PMG, Nick mentioned that earlier. I think it has 2.5%, 5%, a small.
We increased it to 5, I believe.
Up to 5% of those dollars can go towards studies, is what the TPC approved project management process says. Okay, so that's what was said. That increase was probably within what, the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was in 2020.
Yeah, so I mean that gets us up to that $1 million mark, right?
Yeah. In theory, yeah. So 5% of 27 million. Somebody else can do the math. Yeah. It's over $1 million. It'd be 1.35, I guess, if the 27 million is the number.
To be clear, Andy, I don't want to conflate that those funds are available through this call for planning.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So this call, to be very clear, thank you, Nick. This call for studies is right here, right now, April 18th deadline. Nick mentioned a call for projects. That's later this year, okay? That's call for all projects, okay? That's call for projects that include studies that want project funds. Does that make sense? Okay? So that's later this year. I think maybe I don't want to speak for Dirk, but I think for the bigger planning studies, that's about all we can only afford it with those dollars, not these dollars, right? Because we've only got 225,000 federal, I should say. So that number all in would be maybe closer to 300,000. That's worth mentioning as well. So, Okay, here's the application process. Let's go to the scoring system, and I cannot see it on my screen. Elizabeth, can you share, or,
Stop sharing, I think.
yeah, I'll stop sharing. All right, and I will, where to go? Where's that? That's in the packet. It's in the meeting packet. In your meeting packet, you have a scoring system, okay? So that scoring system was developed by us in the past few weeks, okay? And that's how we want this to be a transparent process. We certainly do, and we certainly have no intention of being anything of the sort otherwise, okay? So let me get to it. I'll get to it in a second. Hang with me. I apologize for the delay. All right. And then here. Sorry. Share screen. All right, I'm back. All right. Again, here's some of the guidance. Moving down on the guidance, there's the schedule. Moving beyond the schedule, study evaluation scoring, very important, okay? 100-point system, okay? 50% of the points are basically are documentable need for this study, okay? Very important that it meets that it has a need, that this study goes to meet some need that is out there, that exists in your city, your county, on your corridor, et cetera, okay? Very important, okay? So all studies get up to 20 points there, while you say, there's 20, but if you say up to 50, the other 30 are dependent on the type of your study, okay? So if you're doing a complete streets, bike, ped, trail, safety project type thing, you'll get scored on a certain scale, you know? You can get up to 30 points there. While if the study's nature is to do some congestion mitigation activities type things, there are some common bonds here. Is it multimodal, for example, is a common bond? That's important to know about too. Is it sub-area or citywide transportation plan? You know, it probably isn't fair to judge those on the same scale. So again, that 30 points, that 30 out of the 50 can hit there. Okay, and you don't have to claim which category you are. The scoring process will claim it yourself. Whatever you get the most points of, in essence, is what it would be in case that there's gray area. And then transit studies. If it's unique to transit, you know, there's a bit of a scoring. There's some scoring there. Okay, all right. So again, this is in your meeting packet. One of the emphasis areas is equity related. So we want to make that a part of our scoring system. We can and should, and we will. We plan to. So, is the study in an EJ area? You get max points, okay? Does the study have maybe not EJ level high concentrations of those EJ populations, but high nonetheless? You get good points as well. Some jurisdictions don't have many EJ areas, so you know, but the study may go toward vulnerable populations nonetheless. Study around schools, for example, okay? So we want to make that, not limit us the possibilities there as well. So seniors, zero-car households, those with disabilities, youth, those are the types of things, if your study's in an area that it cannot identify as wide, the study, and maybe ultimately the projects that might be envisioned by the study could serve those types of populations. So again, 15 out of the possible 100 there on what we've called equity in this case, okay? 15 more points on kind of commitment you're making. So 9 of those are kind of, you know, project history. Many sponsors have good project history. There should be no problem, okay? 6 points, 6 of those 15. Here's what we're going to try this, or we're proposing to try this. Like I said earlier, the 20% match requirement is present here, just like it is for your more traditional projects. We want to give 1 additional point for every 5% that you match above 20. Okay, we want to give bonus points for a community, for an agency that says I want to do this project and I'm willing to put more skin in the game. we'll give you bonus points, if you will, or we'll give you points. If you match up to 50%, you get 6 points, right? That's five extra percent, or 6 times 5 gives you the 30, that from 20 to 50%, you get 6 points for matching 50%. We would love it if lots of folks commit to over matching. That will allow us for these dollars to go farther. No question about it. So 20 is the minimum. 20 is the bare minimum. But you can get points if you do it 50. If you can do more than 50, that's fine too. But you'll max out at 50 or those 6 points. And then last but not least, how consistent is what you're trying to implement with our MTP? We've got some goals, objectives, performance measures, etc. Please document how your study goes toward achieving those ends, and you can get a good chunk of points here. Elizabeth, did I forget to mention anything you'd like to share?
No, and we came up with this a little bit last minute to help us with what we know will be a very competitive process. So we did look at other areas to help inform this. So I guess just keep that in mind too, as you're looking it over, that is based in some research.
Again, this is an action item. You know, the action item would be to potentially approve, you know, the process generally, but for sure, but including, I don't want to underestimate the priorities here in the scoring system here.
All right, is there a motion to accept this suggestion? So moved. Second. All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? How do we get with that 225 again?
225, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. 225 is more or less an estimate of the additional funds. I mentioned that 15% increase, okay? That's pretty much right, that number. So you know, most of our operation is going to be funded with the same, you know, the chunk of the money that was funded this current fiscal year, right? So that 225 is basically it's in essence the new money. It's the new money. The new federal money. Again, 225 federal comes out to 281, or I think the numbers are overall.
Okay. So you would hope to get, you said as many projects out of this as possible. But that would anticipate what? 4 or 5? I mean,
I'd love it if we get 4 or 5. That'd probably take some overmatch, to be frank.
The money doesn't go too far on these studies.
No, it doesn't. We know that. We're aware of that. And again, we hope this becomes an annual process. In wintertime, let's say, hey, the call for 2024 studies is what we bring to you, and we get it set up in the spring, and so it's ready to roll on an annual rolling basis is the idea here. So get some momentum built. This will be kind of year one.
Any other questions here? Motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. Complete street programs. Okay.
We have Mike Sewell on the line. Mike is with Gresham Smith. Mike's joining us remotely. Mike is by all means an expert on complete streets, among other things. And so, Mike, our meeting ends at 2. So I know if you don't mind, can hopefully we can maybe be 10, 15 minutes type thing. I hope that can be okay. I apologize for cutting you a little short.
That's perfect. This is a very abbreviated just intro to complete streets, and it's really nice to see. I know a lot of the friendly faces on, and I'm glad some of my cohorts here in Louisville are on that I deal with complete streets a lot. Mike King and Dirk being two of them. So for some brief introductions, my name is Mike Sewell. I am one of the owners at Gresham Smith, but curriculum vitae, quick introduction. Spent the vast majority of about 24 years of my career really focused on complete streets and kind of right-sizing projects. I sit on the National Board of Directors at the executive level for the League of American Bicyclists. I got to testify in front of Congress in 2019 for the importance of multimodal funding and safety projects. I've co-authored NCHRP 880, and then I love that I saw some innovation in tech kind of desire, because I've also developed and have incubated a new idea that I started about 2 years ago, which is focused on using biometric data to determine where stress from users can be used in the better planning of multimodal infrastructure. And that's currently going, it's patent pending, and it's currently going through the first rounds of venture capitalist funding, which is really exciting to me too. So basically all things being really focused on the importance of multimodal with a complete streets lens. I'm going to share my screen really quick, and there's only a handful of slides, but let me know when you get it.
We've got it, Mike.
Okay, perfect. So real quick, what are they? And it's simple. I think a lot of people get confused about the notion of complete streets, and it's actually a really easy thing. It's just designing streets that work for every user that's going to be out there. That means transit users, that means pedestrians, bikes, that means aging populations, all ages and abilities, but it also means cars. And I think a lot of us, and I know several engineers on the call now, have gone through, formal engineering training. And when I was coming up and got my master's in it, they teach you how to design for cars. And there's not a lot of common sense or real kind of focus on these multimodal users. And it's a mistake, because when you look at the math behind who's dying on our roads, a significant number of those are people outside of a car. And what you do if you really take this complete streets approach is you design safer facilities that just keep everyone out there a lot safer. And Mike King is the one that lined up me being on this call, and I appreciate Mike making that recommendation. And I know Louisville Metro does have a complete streets ordinance that's gone through some iterations. Do you want to share your thoughts, Mike, quickly on that, or maybe Dirk wants to jump in as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks. So we originally, as Louisville Metro, adopted our first complete streets ordinance back in 2008. At the time, we were pretty cutting edge. We were one of the few cities in the country that had one. It was a really good policy. And it was kind of our first delve into this policy approach to ensuring a more inclusive way of creating our transportation system here in Louisville. Accompanying that on the original one was a complete streets design manual, which really got into sort of the details of how we can achieve these policies. And it was great at the time, but then we quickly learned that it got outdated really, really fast. And then it took us some time for us to get going. Mike, if you want to put into that next slide. So fast forward about 11 years, we had several planning documents, including the city's comprehensive plan, note that we needed to update our complete streets policy because it just wasn't working. It was way outdated, along with the design manual. So in 2019, we did a kind of complete overhaul, but it was really an update of our existing complete streets ordinance. And basically, these are just kind of the bullet points real quick of what all that did. It modernized the language to reflect evolving technologies. When I say that, I'm most notably thinking of scooters, but also the old one had some weird language in there, like coaster sleds and things like that. If anybody knows what a coaster sled is, we haven't figured it out yet, so let me know, please. But we also used it kind of built upon national standards. If you remember anything from what I'm talking about, if you're interested in doing a complete streets ordinance, this next one's probably the most important thing that we found through it. And it was this really strong focus on context sensitive design. Louisville is obviously an urban county, but there's still some very rural parts of Louisville as well. So the designs that work in kind of the core and some of our urban neighborhoods don't really work for the suburbs. And what works in the suburbs doesn't really work when you get out to like your Floyd's Fork area and some of the more rural populations. So this idea of one size fits all is not the approach to do here. Made it very palpable for our elected officials to adopt this new policy. It does not deter any road maintenance. We set it up so repavings and things like that would not be deterred as a result of this. We tied it to our comprehensive plan. Most importantly, we utilized our CHASE principles, which are connected, healthy, authentic, sustainable, and equitable, with equitable being the most important part. We put in specific performance measures, with one of those specifically focusing on that equity component. But then the policy itself allowed us the flexibility to create a new complete streets design manual. If anybody would like to take a look at it, it's on our website. I'm happy to send you a link at some point. And then last kind of but not least is it didn't make any regulatory changes for us. So this was a policy document that looks at anytime, basically the way we framed it is anytime you're changing the geometry or functionality of the roadway, that's when it would kick in this complete streets policy. So it's not regulatory in any way like that. So that's a quick overview of the Metro side of it. If anybody's ever interested in learning a little more, Dirk and I would be happy to talk you through it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Well, and the reason I asked for that brief introduction is my firm has also been hired by KYTC to develop now a statewide complete streets policy that the folks at KIPTA, as well as the overarching kind of umbrella that you all cover, can take advantage of. And I think it's really important. Mike mentioned too, having a policy as well as a manual. And the manual will help to support the designers, but it's going to be written in a way that all municipalities can take advantage of. It's going to be easy to understand, easy to walk through kind of the necessary steps to make sure that you're taking current best practices into consideration while still being allowed that flexible approach, and flexibility in design is very important. But at the same time, then it's going to be supported with a statewide policy that says, hey, if you're expecting to get state funds, you should really be doing this. This is the right thing to do for us in the responsible charge of space inside the right of way. And it all boils down to this, that this is necessary because safety, number one. I mentioned this, but we kill a whole lot of folks that are not in cars. And when you make the road, when you slow folks down, when you drive the context that where motorists can follow closer to the speed limit, it saves lives, period. And so when you can make it safer for just looking at cars, all other users benefit from that too. But again, it's that really focused approach on how do I just make better connections that just work for people. Number two, funding. I think probably everyone on the call has had their eyes on the latest federal funding bill. There's a huge new focus now on aligning dollars with the statistics. So where you kill a certain amount of pedestrians, you have to spend that amount of dollars fixing pedestrian related safety issues. That's really important. And that's a new change in this bill. And if you look at just the percentages in Kentucky, I don't know the current stat, but last I think I checked, it was right around 20% of people killed were pedestrians. It goes upwards of like 38% in a lot of our urban areas. That's a significant number of people outside of cars that are being killed on our roadways. And as Mike mentioned too, there's emergent technology happening. There's scooters, there's little hoverboards. All of these things are on our sidewalks and in our road, and we have to have a good way to capture and then kind of put them in a place that makes them be safe. Quality of life is also very important, and this was a big point from a lot of the smaller rural communities. Is they're experiencing brain drain. They're trying to create really nice places that people can go to, take in this historic charm of these smaller areas. They reap the benefits of creating places people want to go to, but at the same time, it's all rooted in safety. And there's demand for this, especially if you look at the past couple of years where people were really cooped up and really focused on getting out, being active. We saw a tremendous amount of new people staying out of their cars, not just because they couldn't go to, they weren't going to work, but they realize it's a really fun thing to do. It's nice to maintain your sanity and get that respite by getting out and being active, especially in our right of ways. And we have things like this across the state. Mike alluded to the very rural nature, and there's a dichotomy of urban and rural areas, but people want this. And we need to do this for the folks that are dependent on our right of way to move around. Kentucky also ranks pretty low. If you look at national kind of aggregated scoring for multimodal connectivity, the League of American Bicyclists, and I was not involved in this scoring, so don't yell at me for ranking Kentucky this way, but they rank 43rd out of 50. And KYTC in particular views this as a really good opportunity for them to take a stand for multimodal users. And they're using this scorecard. If you've not gone through this process as a municipality, I would recommend that you go through this process with the League of American Bicyclists. You can fill out this application, and they will give you specific recommendations on how you can overcome some of the multimodal problems that you probably have in your community. It's a great service that you can get. But if you also compare it to other national metrics like the Dangerous by Design, I think Kentucky is about 20th on the list of most dangerous places to move around. It's not great to show up on these lists. And again, we have a lot of really cool things in Kentucky, especially in the KIPTA region. And we should really be taking care of the folks that want to come to this area. Why complete streets? There's lots of really great benefits for doing this well. Improved safety, better health, stronger economies. Stronger economies is really important. If you're really curious about what I mean when I say stronger economies, I always point people to the Epc Institute. I believe it's housed out of Purdue in Indiana. But they have really taken a close look at when you do complete streets, when you do multimodal really well, what does that mean for the viability and net revenue generation of adjacent businesses, as well as the municipalities at large. The municipalities and the adjacent businesses that do this well are earning consistently 35 to 40% more tax-based revenue. That's important. And so the municipalities on the call, if you're not behind Complete Streets, Jeffersonville, I know is probably on the call. They have done a fantastic job. When the Big Four bridge opened up, they converted a lot of their streets. It didn't take a lot of time. They just put some shared use markings down. People understood that multimodal users were going to be on the roads, and they are reaping a huge benefit. And in many things, I think that Jeffersonville is probably farther along than a larger area like Louisville, because they responded fast. It doesn't take a lot of difficult steps to pull this off, but they did a good job. So I always point to that. Smarter growth. And again, I'll point to Jeffersonville. They had a boom downtown where they started to accommodate for all of these new pedestrians, the new mixed use going in. It's working very well. Reduce costs. Overall, bikes typically don't tear up the road. Pedestrians don't tear up the road. Where you give people options that they can use, they get used. More choices and more livable communities, all those things I think make perfect sense, and I don't need to elaborate on them. What do they look like? There's not like a single checklist that you can go through, but they are very context sensitive. And I think Mike mentioned this too. Every street looks a little bit different. You don't have to have sidewalks on a street to make it a complete street. Dirk Gowen's on the call. And in his neighborhood over there, they don't have sidewalks. Is it safe? Yeah. Everyone knows that people that are going to be walking on their neighborhood streets. People can ride their bikes on their neighborhood streets, and it's super safe because the context of that road says that it's set up. Drivers know that it's going to be a shared use space, and it makes sense. It's fine. So you don't have to go through a lot of additional design. It's not a costly way to implement these in many cases. It's just fitting the context and making sure that every user understands that context. There's lots of different elements though to consider with Complete Streets, and I won't go through them. A couple things that I will kind of highlight though are landscaping and street furniture. They're in traffic calming, those things go hand in hand. There are active measurements that we can put in as engineers and planners to drive the speed limit to a certain number, but there's also lots of active, meaning like we can put in stoplights or stop signs, speed humps. Those actively slow people down, but we can do things passively too. We can restrict the roadway widths. We can put vertical landscape elements. All of those things reinforce to drivers that maybe they should slow down. Maybe they're entering a context that they should be paying attention, or maybe somebody could run out in the road that's playing in a yard. All of those things, active and passive management, are really important. And I think the reason I like those two is we don't have all the answers as engineers. So be open to spending just a little bit of money on maybe having a landscape architect throw some ideas out there. They're smart folks and they do a good job in certain settings like that. There's also stormwater management. I'll say this, you can spend the same dollar 3 times where you want to create separation. So let's say you have a sidewalk, you build in some green space, you choke down a roadway. That green space not only is providing a buffer area that pedestrians will feel safer in because they don't have cars buzzing them, but maybe you can do some infiltration. Maybe you can do some green infrastructure there to help improve water quality. And that's what I mean when I say spending the same dollar 3 times. You can accomplish multiple goals by doing Complete Streets well. It doesn't take a whole lot of additional costs in many cases. Again, I won't go into a lot of detail because I know we're running out of time. But again, access management's a new thing that a lot of people are really interested in too. As we get less people going into the office every day and more people taking Ubers, Lyfts, scooters, other things like that, they want to make sure that we're providing, points for people to park their scooters and drop-off zones, or when we do road diets, making sure that we continue to support freight drop-off without blocking lanes. Those are kind of the new things that we need to be thinking about as engineers, and not just providing as many lanes as possible to get through a setting. Let's provide access to the setting and then make sure that we set up these zones and our pit of parts well. Almost as important as what they are not. Complete Streets are not a one-size-fits-all. You can't go down through that checklist of elements and check all the boxes and say, ta-da, it's done, it's beautiful. It may be pretty, but that's not to say that we followed the standard of care for planning and engineering. There's a famous case where they checked all the boxes for AASHTO in New York. It was 12-foot lanes, more than adequate, lanes going through this residential neighborhood. Well, people were driving too fast. A kid got killed the parents sued the engineer and they were held liable. They realized that, yeah, they met AASHTO's requirements, but or AASHTO's recommendations, but it didn't fit the context, and that engineer was held liable. There are new things out here that we can't just follow this checklist. We have to be more flexible in how we approach transportation systems. A design prescription is exactly the same thing. You can't just thou shalt follow AASHTO and expect good results. That's not good enough. And there's lots of new best practices out there like NACTO. In 2013, KYTC, I see Tom Hall's on here, Sidro, I saw you were from KYTC. 2013, FHWA said, don't just follow these manuals. We want you to be flexible. You should take into consideration national best practices like NACTO. NACTO was called out by name by FHWA as being good to follow. So use that to your best, or use that to your advantage. Automatic census place, I think that goes very well with, you can't just check boxes and expect it to be beautiful and earn more money, but really designing for users is what it's all about. And as I mentioned, there's no magic formula for this. It's really being attuned to your users. You need to really meet them in public engagement, find out what they really need to get, how they're using our right-of-way, how would they like to use our right-of-way space, and design for that. So with that, I think I left you a couple minutes. Andy, I really appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully that did the job for you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you, Mike, appreciate it. You want to have 1 minute on the last item, unified planning program here?
Yes, sir. I'll be extremely brief. I hope that's okay with everybody. I assume it is. I'm going to share my screen real quick. One of the things that Nick mentioned early in his is we've got one of our core planning products is this thing called a Unified Planning Work Program, aka UPWP. A UPWP basically defines the work we do, how we're going to do it, and how much we're going to spend on it, type thing. So that's an annual requirement. I have kept this draft UPWP. I was required to by to submit it to the 2 states and federal highways, or actually slightly different procedures in each state. But nonetheless, the draft is out for review, okay? So you can get there via our main transportation page. You can go down here and find draft UPWP FY23. There's a pretty cover, okay? So again, what's in a UPWP? It defines what we're going to do next year, okay? And I'll try to be brief and hustle through this. It defines all of the different elements. Kind of, we've got our core elements like monitoring type things, long-range planning, short-range planning, program administration, commuter services is our rideshare program. So it establishes not only what we're going to do, how much we're going to spend on it. So I'll find one down here. Probably as a good example as any is probably, let's say, Elizabeth sitting next to me, so I'll say Metropolitan Transportation Plan Maintenance, okay, under the long-range planning element. So a core element, a sub-element. It describes in detail what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what we're going to produce, again, how we're going to do it, what's it related to, who's going to do it. Epc Mpo is going to do this one. Some of the other ones might be some others. How much time? That's a big element, right? We're going to commit 4,000 hours to that work element. Many of them are much less than that in terms of hours, okay? Probably as important as all of these words, probably far more important than the words, you'll find in the appendices, the numbers, the budgetary numbers, okay? So this establishes how much we plan to spend under each of those core elements. Those are our core MPO elements, if you will, and then we've got our rideshare element identified separately. Notably, we have in our UPWP reserved for planning studies. That one of the recent agenda items, the one I was mentioning earlier. So there's that $225,000 number, with 56,000 in local match gets us to 281,000. Okay, so the numbers are a big part of this too, to be clear. It's distributed by all those different work elements, all sorts of different ways. You can go on to find some other information. The point is, it's out for review. I'd appreciate you all to take a look at it if you can. I must submit that to the states by the end of April, so it's out for review right now. So any comments that you can receive, we've received a few so far. So any comments that you all have I'd be grateful for them. And so again, I'll be bringing this back to you all at the April meeting for the final.
All right, thank you, Andy. Is there any more business to attend to today at this, transportation policy?
Real quick, I want to identify or note that we have two new MPO staff, or two new Transportation Division staff. Alex Pazurski is in the gray suit back there. Alex comes to us from an agency called Ride New Orleans. Do I have that right? Ride New Orleans. So Alex is a new member not only to KIPTA but to the community. He's the transportation planner, so he'll be doing all sorts of fun stuff. And then to his right, our left, is Joseph Garcia. Joseph is our newest GIS technician. So Zach has a full staff of 4. If only briefly, he's back down to 3 because Anne-Marie Sacra, who many of y'all know, she just had her baby girl last week. So there's a new member to the KIPTA family. So here soon, Zach will have a full staff of 4, including himself. Nick mentioned the carbon reduction formula. I had that on my notes too. Potentially big money coming to KIPTA, new money coming to KIPTA. And then last but not least, the Indiana Mpo Conference, October 4th through 6th, is going to be hosted in Jeffersonville. We're hosting at a facility called 300 Spring. We will be reaching out for sponsorships. There's one consultant in the room at least. And we're going to be reaching out for speakers very soon. So if any of you guys would like to be on the agenda, I'm sure we could find some room for you on our agenda. Again, October 4th through 6th over in Southern Indiana. That's the Indiana MPO Conference. And with that, I'm done.
Okay. All right, thank you, Andy. Anything else? Motion to adjourn? So moved. Second. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.